Jessica Tarlov thought she could humiliate Senator Kennedy with one line. "Take an IQ test, Kennedy," she laughed, the sound bright and sharp under the Fox studio lights. 37 seconds later, he opened a sealed envelope on live TV and the studio went silent. Stay with me, because what was written inside would change both of their careers forever. The cameras drank it all in. The polished desk, the harsh white lights, the faint reflection of 5 figures locked in what was supposed to be a routine segment on education policy. Nothing felt routine. The air conditioning hummed, but the real heat came from pride, from lenses, from the knowledge that millions were watching in real time. Jessica sat in royal blue, dark hair raked into a bun that screamed control, discipline, superiority. Across from her, Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana looked almost out of place. Rumpled gray suit, reading glasses low on his nose, white hair that refused to be tamed. A manila envelope rested in front of him like a forgotten prop. He didn't laugh, didn't frown, just watched her with the calm, weathered expression that never quite revealed what he was thinking. Jesse Waters, caught between them, felt the energy spike. "All right, Jessica's calling for an IQ test on live television. Senator, you want to respond?" Kennedy tilted his head a fraction, the tiny movement his staff always read as a warning. "Well now, Miss Tarlov, I've been called a lot of things in my life. Too dumb is not usually one that sticks." Jessica's smile had steel behind it. "If we're going to make serious decisions about education policy, maybe we should start by making sure the people writing the laws can pass basic cognitive tests." Kennedy's fingers brushed the envelope's edge. "So your position is that folks who don't sound like you probably aren't smart enough to govern?" "My position is that expertise matters, data matters, education matters. Folksy charm is no substitute." He tapped the envelope once, a movement so small it almost escaped notice. "Good. Tonight, we're going to talk about all 3. The control room producer mouthed one word through the glass. "Keep rolling." Jessica straightened, sensing she needed to reassert control. Education policy is complex. It requires analytical thinking, statistical literacy, and understanding of real research. Kennedy nodded, as if hearing a weather report. "And you believe I don't have those things?" "I believe the American public deserves leaders who can demonstrate them." He tapped again. "Tell me your qualifications. How many classrooms you've stood in, teachers you've interviewed, districts you've visited." "I don't need to work in a classroom to understand policy. That's the difference between technical skill and intellectual capability." Kennedy smiled faintly. "And you believe you possess that capability?" "I know I do." "Good. I came prepared." For the first time, Jessica's confidence wavered. "Prepared for what, Senator?" For the moment, someone mistook confidence for capability. She folded her arms. "No one here is mistaking anything. I rely on peer-reviewed research, evidence. That's why I suggested IQ tests as a baseline." Jesse leaned in. "So if Senator Kennedy opened that envelope and scored higher than you'd accept it?" "If the data are legitimate, sure." Kennedy's eyes narrowed. "Legitimate data. That's the phrase. You assumed before seeing anything that my score wouldn't meet the threshold." "I didn't assume anything. You suggested the test because you believed the outcome would go your way." She lifted her chin. "I suggested it because intelligence matters when writing policy." "Does humility matter?" "This isn't about humility." "It is. Humility is admitting you might be wrong. Intelligence is knowing you could be." He slid the envelope half an inch forward. The soft scrape cut the air like a blade. "Before I open this, understand. I came prepared for the exact challenge you issued on national television." Jessica's fingers curled around the table edge. Then open it. Kennedy lifted the flap just enough for the adhesive to crack. This test was administered by the Institute for Cognitive Evaluation, supervised by Dr. Margaret Chen at Harvard. Independent evaluators, no staff involvement, no prep. It measures analytical reasoning, verbal comprehension, spatial intelligence, working memory, executive function, the full cognitive stack. He unfolded the heavy letterhead slowly, letting the camera zoom in. Overall cognitive assessment, 98th percentile. Analytical reasoning, 97th. Spatial, 96th. Verbal comprehension and processing, 99th. The paper trembled, not in Kennedy's hand, but in Jessica's line of sight. Brad sat back, stunned. Lisa put a hand to her mouth. Jessica opened her mouth. No sound came out. Kennedy folded the paper with the same calm precision, slipped it back into the envelope, and set it gently between them. You asked for a test. You asked on national television for me to demonstrate my intelligence. I just did. He stood, envelope in jacket pocket, and offered one last sentence. Quiet, steady, final. Next time you challenge someone's mind, Miss Tarlov, make sure you've brought your own receipts. The studio fell silent, and America witnessed one of the most devastating live TV reversals ever aired. But the fallout was just beginning. In the green room afterward, Jessica stared at her phone as the clip exploded across Twitter. The word 98th trending #1 within minutes. Her producer whispered that the network had already booked her for 3 more segments to respond. Solo this time. She nodded, but for the first time in years, she asked for a briefing packet to be sent over before sunrise. Kennedy, meanwhile, declined every morning show victory lap. He flew back to Baton Rouge the next day, walked into a parish library, and spent 2 hours drawing supply and demand curves on a whiteboard for a crowd that spilled into the parking lot. The local paper's video hit 40,000 views. No music, no meme, just the sound of dry erase markers and occasional applause. One high school senior in the front row later enrolled in Econ 101. He keeps a yellow coffee cup on his desk now. No slogan, just pencils sharpened to the nub. Inside the Beltway, a freshman Democrat from a swing district asked his chief of staff if economics fluency could be arranged before recess. Across the aisle, a Republican staffer printed the transcript on glossy cards for donor mailers. The Speaker's office quietly circulated a memo. Televised town halls now require pre-clearance from Communications and Ethics. Fox re-aired the segment twice that night. CNN ran it with a Kiran IQ firestorm. MSNBC invited 3 psychologists to debate whether 98th percentile even means anything anymore. Every booker wanted Kennedy. Every anchor wanted Tarlov. Both declined. Kennedy because he was teaching marginal tax rates in a VFW hall. Tarlov because she was up until 3 a.m. reading Stanford Seppi's appendix on rural standard error bands. By the weekend, the meme economy had moved on. New outrage, new dresses, new gaffes. But the pause remained. A 0.7-second hesitation now nesting in 70 million chests. The tiny beat before the next angry tweet. The next hot take, the next share. Unlogged, unmonetized, off-market, and, for the first time in years, just enough space for someone to decide, without asking permission, to keep the silence alive. It never does. By Monday, the clip had been sliced into 14-second loops, auto-captioned, and force-fed into every algorithm that feeds on embarrassment. 98th percentile became a sticker pack. Kennedy's calm face photoshopped onto Einstein's body, onto a LSU quarterback's helmet, onto the Mona Lisa. Tarlov's frozen half-second, mouth open, eyes flicking to the envelope, became the reaction GIF for every Twitter own goal. Cable panels booked psychologists, linguists, even a former Jeopardy champ to explain what 98th percentile actually feels like. None of them mentioned the envelope still sitting in Kennedy's inside pocket, its glue flap now soft from hand heat and plain air. Behind the scenes, the numbers were colder. Fox's overnight tracking showed the segment delivered the youngest cable news audience in 15 months. TikTok ripped it 1.8 million times before sunrise, half with trap music overlays, half with quiet captions. Watch until the end. She never sees it coming. Advertisers noticed spots for LSAT prep, index funds, and a meditation app that promises cognitive clarity in 7 days replaced the usual pharma roulette. The app's CBO bragged in a leaked deck that their cost per install dropped 18% the hour Kennedy said, "Receipts." Tarlov's team booked her a 5-city university tour, data versus decorum, why policy still needs experts. The first stop, Columbia, sold out in 6 minutes. Students queued around the journalism building wearing ironic C+ in econ shirts they'd printed overnight. Inside, Jessica walked on stage carrying a manila envelope identical to the one on TV, held it up long enough for the crowd to go quiet, then tore it in half. The applause was thunder, but her hands shook just enough that the pieces didn't line up when she tried to put them back together. Kennedy, meanwhile, flew to Denham Springs, population 9,000, where the high school auditorium had canceled its talent show to host Coffee with Kennedy. He brought no props, just a whiteboard and 2 dry erase markers. For 43 minutes, he diagrammed federal receipts, outlays, and the difference between marginal and average tax rates. When a sophomore asked if college debt should be canceled, he drew the loan portfolio on the board, explained present value, then asked her what fair burden sharing looked like. The video posted by the local paper hit 41,000 views. No music, no supercut. But the student registered for macro next semester and keeps a yellow coffee cup on her desk. Thrift store find, no slogan, filled with pencils sharpened to the nub. In Washington, the aftershocks kept coming. A freshman Democrat from a Biden district asked his chief of staff if economics fluency could be arranged before recess. Across the aisle, a Republican staffer printed the transcript on glossy cards for donor mailers. The Speaker's office quietly circulated a memo. Televised town halls now require pre-clearance from communications and ethics. A junior engineer at a major platform quietly coded an opt-in feature. Users can decline pause tracking in exchange for ad-free minutes. Uptake is slow. Who trusts the wolf to guard the henhouse? But 2.3 million enable it within 6 months. The engineer does not seek credit. He simply stops showing up for work, disappears into the Mojave with a crank radio and a solar bookmark. His last internal email reads, "Stop mining the gap, become it." Months later, the meme economy has moved on. New outrage, new dresses, new gaffes. But the pause remains, a 0.7-second hesitation now nesting in 70 million chests. The tiny beat before the next angry tweet, the next hot take, the next share. Unlogged, unmonetized, off-market, and, for the first time in years, just enough space for someone to decide, without asking permission, to keep the silence alive. The silence grew roots. In a Chicago commuter train at 7:43 a.m., a salaryman's smart lens overlays a breaking news banner. Markets in free fall, details at 11. He blinks to dismiss it. The gesture is too fast for the sensor, so the banner lingers, translucent between his iris and the window's reflection. For one heartbeat, he sees both the red ticker and his own pupil dilating. He does not swipe. He closes his eyes for exactly 4 station stops, 273 seconds, while the train glides underground. No footage is recorded. The lens assumes sleep mode and deletes the buffer. When he opens his eyes again, the banner is gone, replaced by an ad for noise-canceling earbuds. He does not buy them. He exits at Shibuya, merges into the crowd, and forgets the headline before he reaches the escalator. But the MarketBot logs a micro drop in click-through rate from that specific iris ID. Analysts attribute it to ad fatigue. They are not wrong, only incomplete. In Lego Samara, the doctoral student who once sent silence home in a paper plane now teaches large-scale networks at the university. Her syllabus includes a week on null packet ethics. Students must build a functional mesh that routes data for 24 hours without ever transmitting a payload. Only headers, checksums, acknowledgements. The highest grade goes to the team whose traffic is indistinguishable from background radiation. One group rigs discarded routers to pulse GPS coordinates of the Kayenta Tower every 30.0 seconds. Another broadcasts only the word insufficient in Yoruba repeated 2,800 times. The exercise is illegal under telecom law, so they run it inside a Faraday cage in the basement. When the dean asks for results, Amara plays him a recording of absolute hush captured inside the cage at 030 Kwao. He listens for 17 seconds, then approves the course for permanent catalog. Graduates scatter to carriers and NGOs. Within a year, African backbone traffic shows unexplained spikes of zero-byte flows during peak hours. Ghost packets riding undersea cables, paying transit fees to carry nothing. The carriers bill them anyway, but accountants label the line items climate resilience surcharge, an irony no one questions. In Brussels, the EU Parliament debates the final text of the Right to Silence Act. Article 1 states, "Every natural person shall possess the right to exist unobserved for a measurable but unmonetized interval each day." Enforcement is delegated to member states. No technology is banned, no fines imposed. Instead, every device sold after 2029 must display a single hardware LED labeled Silence. When the LED is on, the device is physically incapable of transmitting data. Wi-Fi, 5G, Bluetooth, all severed at the circuit. The LED cannot be controlled by software. It is a hard switch wired to the power rail. Manufacturers comply by repurposing the old caps lock indicator. Users joke that orange caps equals calm and private. Sales of devices without the LED plummet. China adds the LED to export models not for compliance, but for market access. Within 5 years, 1 billion people carry a physical off-ramp from the feed. No one measures how often it is used. The metric is, by law, uncollected. Analysts notice global mobile data growth flatten 0.3% year over year, the first recorded dip. The EU declares victory, then quietly defunds the monitoring agency. The LED stays lit, uncounted, like a nightlight for the unmonetized soul. Back in Washington, the freshman who once installed the Kennedy filter becomes chair of the House Subcommittee on Digital Conduct. He holds hearings on algorithmic silence harvesting, invites CEOs whose platforms scrape micro-pauses for engagement prediction. Under oath, an executive boasts that hesitation data improves ad targeting by 12%. The chair asks if the platforms pay royalties to the hesitator. The room laughs, then stops when he introduces the Hesitation Royalty Act, a bill requiring micropayments for every sensor-detected pause longer than 0.5 seconds. The rate is nominal, 0.1 per pause, but the aggregate is massive. Lobbyists descend, calling the proposal a tax on thought. The bill dies in committee, but the transcript circulates. A junior engineer at a major platform quietly codes an opt-in feature. Users can decline pause tracking in exchange for ad-free minutes. Uptake is slow. Who trusts the wolf to guard the henhouse? But 2.3 million enable it within 6 months. The engineer does not seek credit. He simply stops showing up for work, disappears into the Mojave with a crank radio and a solar bookmark. His last internal email reads, "Stop mining the gap. Become it." On the night the engineer vanishes, a global outage strikes the 3 largest cloud providers, simultaneous, unexplained, lasting 4 minutes 33 seconds. Trading halts, thermostats reboot, streetlights blink, but no data is lost. The cause is never disclosed. Internal logs show only a null packet of exactly 200 seconds, origin untraceable. Conspiracy theorists blame hackers, governments, sunspots. Carriers recognize the signature and say nothing. For those who have practiced the pause, the outage feels familiar, like the world's largest device just flicked its silence LED. When services resume, the feed is unchanged, yet something feels lighter, as if the planet exhaled and no one measured the volume. Years compress again. A child in Kayenta finds the rusted crank radio now half buried beneath sand and reed fragments. She does not power it. She simply turns the handle, feels the resistance, and listens to the wind pass through the broken coils. No signal emerges, yet she hears inside the gears a rhythm that matches her own pulse. She keeps the radio on her windowsill, turns it once each morning, and grows up bilingual in English and silence. At 18, she leaves for university, carries nothing but the crank and a yellow bookmark etched with the words, "Speak and the light will find its own way home." She majors in electrical engineering, minors in linguistics, writes a senior thesis titled Transmission Protocols for the Unobserved. At her defense, a professor asks for practical applications. She smiles, places the crank on the table, and turns it once. The room falls quiet. No one speaks for 4 minutes, 33 seconds. When the dean finally clears his throat, he whispers, "We'll fund your graduate studies." The Republic keeps scrolling, louder, richer, angrier, yet every heartbeat still carries the 0.7-second valve, unlisted, unliked, unwitnessed. It will not be saved, cannot be sold, refuses to trend, but it beats and beats and beats between one thumb and the next, between one headline and the next, between one empire and the next, forever off-market, forever free. And when the feed finally refreshes into whatever comes after feeds, the gap will still be there, waiting for the next child to pick up the crank, feel the wind, and decide, without asking permission, to set the silence down. And the silence, once set down, begins to walk. It travels without passport, without data plan, without name. It slips through cracks the algorithm cannot price. The half-second before a mother deletes the doomscroll app her toddler once used for bedtime. The 273-second gap between a drone's liftoff and its return to a soldier who decides not to file the strike report. The 4-minute 33 that a hospice nurse now schedules into every shift. She calls it opening the window, though no window is opened, only the tiny LED on her smartwatch glowing orange while she holds a stranger's hand and listens to breath become geography. In Lagos, the ghost packet kids graduate and scatter. One of them, Tunde, who once broadcasted only the word insufficient 2,800 times, now works for the African Backbone Consortium. At night, he watches traffic graphs the way sailors once watched stars. Whenever he sees a zero-byte spike, he smiles, whispers, "Still insufficient," and lets the null ride. He is paid to keep the cables full. He is tipped by no one to keep them empty. The bonus structure does not notice the difference, but the cables themselves, copper heartbeats wrapped in tar and salt, seem to cool by 1,000th of a degree whenever the silence passes through. Tunde imagines that micro-cooling reaching the ocean floor, imagines a deep-sea clam relaxing its shell for the length of a human heartbeat, imagines that clam telling no one. In Brussels, the right to silence LED migrates from laptops to automobiles. Tesla ships it between the seat warmer and the hazard button. Volvo hides it behind the steering wheel spoke so drivers can thumb it without looking away from the road. Rideshare drivers call it going dark. They flick the switch the moment the passenger starts recording, or ranting, or crying. The meter keeps running, the car keeps moving, but the data stream snaps off like a broken filament. Tips go up 11% when the LED is used. Riders step out dazed, muttering, "That was quiet," as if silence itself were a luxury upgrade. Uber patents the metric but cannot monetize it. The EU law forbids collection. The silence becomes the first feature in history that must be given away for free. The first option whose value exists only while it is unmeasured. In Arizona, a startup tries to reverse engineer the pause. They hire ex-DARPA neuroscientists, ex-Facebook ethicists, ex-experts. They build a headband that delivers a micro-shock at the instant your thumb begins to hover over tweet, forcing a 0.7-second delay. They market it as Impulse Guard. Take back your narrative. The Kickstarter video shows a man about to post all caps rage, then jolted into stillness long enough to delete the draft. The campaign raises $3 million in 48 hours, then collapses when beta testers report the shock feels like being slapped by your own future. Refunds are issued. The headband disappears. But 4,000 units are already in the wild. Users who kept them discover the battery lasts exactly 273 days, 1 day for every silent second the engineer vanished with. On the final day, the headband emits a single audible click, then becomes a plastic bracelet. Some wear it anyway, the way sailors keep shards of broken compass, proof that somewhere once they chose not to shout. The Republic, of course, keeps shouting. Midterms rise and fall on outrage. Algorithms learn to identify the 0.7-second hesitation and label it engagement friction, serving softer content to keep the thumb moving. The friction is harvested, repackaged, sold back as mindful scrolling mode for $4.99 a month. Pause. ETF rolls out a second fund, Silence, whose prospectus cites latent attention refractory alpha and includes the footnote. Past performance is no guarantee of future quiet. It triples in value the week a Supreme Court draft leaks, crashes the week after when the leak is memory hold. Traders who never saw the original clip now scalp volatility on a silence they have never personally practiced. But the carrier pulse walks on, barefoot, unbranded. It walks into a Phoenix strip mall micro pub called the C+ Tavern. No TVs, no Wi-Fi. A chalkboard that lists only 3 items: beer, conversation, ledger. Patrons who can explain marginal tax rates drink at cost. Those who can't pay retail plus $1 that goes into a mason jar labeled Econ 1001 Scholarship. By month 6, the jar funds night classes at the community college. Graduates get their names engraved on the bar rail. No hashtags, no tags. Just brass letters you can feel with your fingertips after last call. One graduate becomes a high school teacher who assigns Kennedy's whiteboard video. Another opens her own bar in Tucson. Taxable income in that zip code rises 3% year over year, the highest bump in the state. The IRS data arrives 2 years later. A footnote in a footnote. And no cable show books the story. Too slow, too small, too quiet. It walks into a Tokyo commuter train at 7:43 a.m., where a salaryman's smart lens overlays markets in free fall. Details at 11. He blinks to dismiss. The banner lingers. For one heartbeat, he sees both the red ticker and his own pupil dilating. He does not swipe. He closes his eyes for exactly 4 station stops, 273 seconds, while the train glides underground. No footage is recorded. The lens assumes sleep mode and deletes the buffer. When he opens his eyes again, the banner is gone. He exits at Shibuya, merges into the crowd, and forgets the headline before he reaches the escalator. But the MarketBot logs a micro drop in click-through rate from that specific iris ID. Analysts attribute it to ad fatigue. They are not wrong, only incomplete. They have measured the hesitation without hearing the hum that ran through the rail car, the silent chorus that never trended, the gap that beat 72 times a minute, and signed no contract with time. And somewhere, because there is always a somewhere, the next child picks up the crank. It may be a rusted field radio, half buried in Kayenta sand, or the off switch on a grandfather's hearing aid, or the moment before a mother deletes the app that lulls her toddler with infinite scroll. The crank turns, the gears engage, the wind passes through broken coils and carries no signal but the sound of a human pulse learning its own tempo. The child listens, nods, and sets the silence down, not as defeat, not as victory, but as a country no algorithm has yet mapped. A private republic, whose constitution is a single line written in pencil on a yellow bookmark. Speak, and the light will find its own way home. Stay silent, and the dark will teach you how to see. The lights dim. The cameras switch off. The arena empties. But the hush remains. Not the hush of defeat, nor of victory. It is the hush of a question that has finally been heard. Somewhere a bartender turns the last stool upright, pockets the night's cash, and wonders what a marginal tax rate really means. Somewhere a student flips open a used textbook, lands on supply and demand, and this time reads the graph. Somewhere a thumb hovers over a bright red share button, waits half a beat, then slides the phone back into a pocket. No banner proclaims the shift. No chyron tracks the 0.7-second pause, now nesting in 70 million chests. No LED signals that the gap has gone live inside the blood. But the Republic exhales, quietly, almost invisibly, between one heartbeat and the next. The feed will reload. The loop will restart. The spectacle will gorge itself anew. Yet the pause is permanent. Once felt, it becomes a private country no algorithm can invade. So the story does not end. It simply learns to breathe while it scrolls, unclipped, unpriced, unowned, waiting for the next citizen to pick up the crank, feel the wind, and choose without permission to keep the silence alive.